Connect to Linux by name rather than IP. I'm new to Linux, currently running Ubuntu 10.04, and I have just finished setting up SSH access to my Linux machine. Currently, I have to use SSH rooted x.x.x.x to connect, but would much rather be able to swap the IP for the computer name, like in Windows with \name, or a domain name, like computername.example.com. I don't really know where to start, so any help would be most appreciated. Please go slowly, as mentioned, I am still new to this. Edit 1. Completely forgot to mention that I am trying to connect from Windows 7, via PuTTY, sorry.
One. 0 config protocols, in order of preference. 1.1. MDNS, Multicast DNS. MDNS originates from Apple and is also known by the name Bonjour, which is Apple's branding for their MDNS implementation. It was originally an IP-based replacement for AppleTalk Discovery services. These days MDNS is available on most platforms and is generally the preferred choice, both for hostname lookup and for service discovery, where it's simpler than many alternatives. MDNS hostnames are always in the form, name.local. Exception, the built-in MDNS handling in Windows 10 Plus will accept bare hostnames like it has done previously, automatically translating them to the MDNS format behind the scenes. Software. Natively supported on Windows 10.1709 and later. At first it was opt-in through a registry setting, but I believe it's on by default now, at least in Windows 11. Can be installed as Apple's Bonjour on Windows XP. Avahi with NES_MDNS is still the preferred option for Linux and BSDS. Systemd resolved with NES_Resolve is another option for Linux, newer than Avahi but still incomplete. Natively supported by macOS, OS X, and iOS. Natively supported by Android_I know Android 11 recognizes local domains, but from what I remember, Android 7 did not yet. Natively supported by my Bosch washing machine, apparently. (1.2) LLMNR. LLMNR was introduced with Windows Vista as a modern alternative to NetBIOS name services, NBNS, being a very similar protocol to MDNS, but using bare hostnames, and lacking the service discovery features. Vista uses the WS Discovery protocol for that purpose instead. However, as of 2023, considered a dead end, Microsoft eventually gave up and fully pivoted to MDNS for local name resolution. Natively supported by Windows Vista, Windows 11. Systemd resolved with NES_Resolve, part of Systemd 216, on Linux. 1.3. NBNS, NetBIOS name services. Part of the old NetBIOS network protocol suite used by Windows, OS/2, MS-DOS, etc. Anything that speaks SMBv1 is likely to support NBNS. And likewise, it's as obsolete as SMBv1 is, and if you disable SMBv1 support in Windows, this also disables NBNS. Provides name resolution and, to some extent, service discovery. NBNS was part of what originally powered Network Neighborhood or My Network Places in Windows. NBNS has no IPv6 support whatsoever. It's also prone to breaking due to some underlying complexity, the browser election mechanism that was originally meant to reduce the chattiness. natively supported on Windows and OS/2. NMBD with NES_Wins, part of Samba, on Linux and BSDS. Apparently OS X supports it natively as well. 2. Methods that are often pre-configured for you. 2.1. DNS using a local, internal, domain name. Home gateways tend to have this built in, as part of the local DNS cache. Often it's just regular NSMISC, which you could run manually if you're setting up a Linux/BSD based gateway. Your gateway takes the hostname from your DHCP request, registers it within its internal DNS service under a domain like .home or .lan, and offers itself as the main DNS server, acting as DNS cache. Works by default with most operating systems, but only with DHCP. The gateway doesn't know hostnames of manually configured hosts, and generally tends to be rather flaky in my experience. Software. A regular DHCP client on the hosts must send the hostname option in its lease requests. Most devices do. NSMISC on the gateway. Larger setups could use DHCPD plus named. 3. Methods involving manual configuration. 3.1. DNS using your own domain name. Works everywhere. Won't help you to actually connect over the internet, though. Dynamic DNS possible if you use DHCP and control a DNS server, otherwise all data is static. You need to actually own a domain name, which will cost a few bucks. 3.2. Free DNS subdomains. Still DNS, just free, or much cheaper than a domain, but also quite limited. Services like Freedens and Dyn offer registration of individual subdomains under a domain they control, for example, myhost.dynes.com. Way too often, the subdomain has already been picked by someone else. Dynamic DNS updates are often allowed, Dynes style. 3.3. /etc/hosts. A text file listing IP address, hostname pairs, which must be manually configured on each client machine. The location is %systemroot %system32 /drivers /etc/host on Windows, /etc/host on Linux and others. 3.4. SSH client configuration. You can save pre-filled hostnames in PuTTY connection profiles, and you can similarly define short names through ~/.ssh/config in OpenSH. 3.5. Post-it notes all over your desk. Pros: very cheap. No naming policy. Infinite data types. Cons: rather unreliable. Must be manually distributed. No TTL, which often results in stale information being cached for months until someone notices. Query algorithms are inefficient. Responses to queries tend to get lost easily, sometimes leaving just a glue record on your monitor. 3 months later, you might find them buffered behind your desk.
Two options. All services. Put an entry for it in /etc/hosts. Don't touch existing lines, add a new one. SSH only. Add a host stanza 2, ~/.ssh/config, with the name you want to use, then add desired options below that. See man5ssh_config, for more details.
From Windows 7, for your edit. When Notepad starts, Go to the bottom of the file and add your IP address and hostname. Save the file, then try pinging it from a command prompt. This will only work from your LAN. Connecting to it from the world, the Your Comment Added, is an entirely different beast involving a DNS, DNS, GoDaddy, etc., and router configuration like NAT, Network Address Translation et al.
If you want to access the Linux box from an arbitrary computer, you would need a domain name. Use a dynamic DNS service to point a domain name to your Linux computer, or the router it is connected to. Once you set this up, it will give you the additional benefit of not having to worry about the IP of your Linux computer ever changing.
Solo 2 segundos.